All right, so it's 12:01. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone again for joining us. We're really excited about today's conversation. We're going to be talking through empowering and developing your professional identity. It is also Women's History Month, so we're very happy to be having this conversation during this great month. So my name is Robin Rosenbaum. I'm Senior Manager of Strategic Partnerships here at Bridge. And at Bridge, we are a people-based company, and we connect you with your next customer. I'm really excited about our two guests that we have. We have our very own Alana Hendlish, who is our Chief Revenue Officer here at Bridge. And we also have one of my favorite humans, Jennifer Sethry, who is joining us, and she is the CEO and founder of Entry Careers. So Jen, if you can talk us through your professional experience, who Entry is and why you decided to start Entry Careers.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I would just say, because, we are talking about, how you move your career along, that everyone thinks it should be in a straight line, and really it's a zigzag, right? If I look back where I started in, television and radio and housing and lighting and I think where we got to Entry is really seeing an opportunity. And, I'm one of those people, if I see a door, I'm interested, I'm either going to push the door open or maybe, take the door down to try to figure it out. But I started Entry about 3 years ago because there was a huge gap and a chasm between candidates and employers trying to connect, getting resumes through. And I felt like I needed to level the playing field for everybody, and that there were 127 reasons why people weren't getting seen, why resumes weren't getting through, why HR people were feeling that there weren't enough qualified applicants. And I thought, I have the skills to do that. So that's what I did.
Awesome. So let's get right into it. 75% of resumes never make it to the employers because of those applicant tracking systems. So can you talk us through what Entry has done as far as creating that algorithm to really reduce bias and increase diversity, and making sure that those resumes are being seen by the people that are doing the hiring at these organizations?
100%. So just a quick little sidebar, and I'm not doing a purple squirrel, I promise. But when we started developing Entry, it was really based on building the cultural match between the candidate and the resume, which really I didn't have, because generally you know somebody who knows somebody. I did it. I did a poor job. I paid to have somebody do it. I applied to 37 jobs that I was super qualified for. Crickets. And that really pissed me off. And so we tried to figure out the why, and we reverse engineered about 100 different applicant tracking system software and found that there was 127 different reasons why resumes weren't getting through. Some of it was your zip code, some of it was gender, some of it was ethnicity, some of it was the font you used, some of it was icons that you used, the size of the font that, we're going to build something that's going to break through this system. And so on the top of it, it just looks like a basic resume. Underneath it is ontology and code that's customized for that specific person who's looking for that specific job. So people can copy and paste the job description into their profile and create a custom resume for that specific job. It also highlights skills gaps that you may have. There's an assessment that shows where you're really skilled, where there may be some room for improvement. So we've done what we can to empower people to get through to the hiring managers, so that the hiring managers go, oh, hey, there really are some great qualified candidates out there. And the candidates end up getting more interviews, then more offers and more choices. Did I do an okay job answering that question?
Yeah. It's about getting your foot in the door, right, Jen? Right. Like if you're getting it through a warm lead or someone that like that's also great. But the point of that is just to get your foot in the door. So that's awesome.
And any way that you can, right? And so again, it's the system is really stacked against candidates, right? Like people use one-click apply. If they do that too much, they end up getting blacklisted, which I don't know that a lot of people know that. The ATS systems that companies use have filters, and mostly we found that they're used to filter people out, not filter people in. And so when you're out in the market, especially now, like, there's a shocking statistic in this deck that, I think in December there were, I think you mentioned, like 226,000 people lost jobs, and 82% of them were women. That's not that's staggering. And I think that's where what we built levels the playing field, and it helps mitigate. I don't want to say it totally eliminates the bias, but it takes the whole heck of it a lot out. And then once you get the interview, it's sort of up to you, but that's half the battle, if not more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know when we first started talking, Jen, I didn't even realize about these applicant tracking systems. I don't think many people do. And it really is crazy to think that we're living in 2021 and diversity and bias and all of these topics are at the forefront. And then we have these applicant tracking systems that these large organizations are supporting and no one really knows about it. So from your perspective, before we move on, how is it that these applicant tracking systems have really made it this far without changing with the times?
Well, I mean, number one, there's no testing of them, right? So like we use cognitive AI and machine learning and natural language processing, when we built our software, but there's no one reviewing them. There's no one saying, hey, so people can say, we work with the EEOC or we have affirmative action, right? But if that doesn't mesh with the ATS systems and the filters that are put on, people don't know about them. And I don't know that even people within the HR space understand all the filters that are actually engaged. And you generally have three parts of HR, right? You have HR, don't get sued, HR, talent engagement, and HR IT. And oftentimes they don't communicate with each other. And I think that's part of why we're having so many issues. And when you look at companies and people that are applying for jobs, you look at some really large companies that have been in the news lately. What are the first things that they ask you? Your age, where do you live, your gender, and if you're applying for a job that, requires maybe a college education, where'd you go to school? And like you said, it's 2021. Why are we even asking these questions? Why aren't people who have the skills getting to the point where the resume is being seen, number one, and number two, even having a chance to be interviewed? I mean, I'm pretty qualified. I got 0 responses, crickets, which was shocking. And it really changed the trajectory of entry. And, with the candidate part of it, I feel like we've really solved that problem. Now we're working with corporations to build anti-bias software, anonymized resumes, so that none of your age, your gender, your ethnicity, your zip code, none of that's going to enter the conversation. I mean, it really shouldn't in the first place.
Exactly. And we're so super excited for entry, and we're so happy to be supporting an organization like yours. So to move on from that topic, let's talk about COVID and the effects that it's had on women. So according to the New York Times, 1 million mothers have left the workforce, along with African Americans, Hispanic, and it really is due to the lack of the childcare option. So I know that both of you are mothers, and I'll ask this question to Alana and Jen. Of course, you can chime in. But how can mothers and working women really balance professional and family life? Because that is something that is taken into consideration and something that we've seen during COVID.
Yeah. So I'll just speak from my experience. I have 3 daughters, all of them born pre-pandemic. Certainly it was a challenge even before that. Jen and I were talking the other day about, when you're a young parent and you're working full time, you just kind of feel like you're failing across the board. I'm failing as a mother, and I'm failing as a career person, my job. I'm letting my colleagues and my coworkers and my boss down. And that's a real thing. When I started my career, when I had my young children, it was kind of like a pivot point. I was accelerating my career, but I was also in what you would call that messy middle, where I was caring for parents and caring for babies and toddlers. And that's just like a really hard time in general. I think one of the things that the pandemic sort of exposed is that you're not really able to like hide at home with your kid and then come to work if you can. Everything's kind of smushed together at the same time. And it's not always easy to do that. I mean, it's never easy to do that. And some employers offer more flexibility. If you have, like, I'm lucky enough to have an extremely involved partner, and I have a community of help, really. So I'm not really, I can't imagine how it must be for a single parent. I think that the pandemic exposing those challenges, bringing it to the forefront is important.
Yeah. And so, oh, go ahead, Jen.
No, I was just going to say that, I think, women, and no disrespect to men at all, but I think there's an expectation that we are taught just that we can do it all, right? We can be a great mom, we can be a great wife, we can be a great partner, we can, make a gourmet dinner, our house can stay clean, our dogs are going to be well behaved. We can host a dinner party for 15 and it's going to be absolutely seamless and no problem. And I think that, number one, I think we sort of sometimes put that on each other. I think we see it on TV. I think we sometimes see it in articles. I think the last year has really given everybody sort of a chance to exhale. And we brought up the childcare. And I think that that's always an issue. I have 3 bonus kids and 2 kids with my husband, and that, that was always a challenge. Where is the balance? And I think the fact that, women are having to choose to leave the workforce to care for their children, number one, it could be a financial decision because men still make more money for doing the same job than women do. That's just a fact. And number two, that there's still, I think, some stereotypical roles there that, moms are more maternal, they're going to do a better job. And that necessarily isn't all the case. And so for everybody out there that has done that and is doing it, like, show yourself some grace, cut yourself some slack, because this is hard. It was hard before the pandemic. And I think now it's exponentially harder than it was before. But I will say that, for me, for my friends, I think there's been more of a village that's been created where people are helping other people out. And I didn't share the story with y'all the other day, but on Nextdoor, when, what was hitting the fan back March, April, May, there was people who were posting on Nextdoor that's like, hey, I don't have any childcare. Can somebody help me out for a couple hours? And, I responded, I'm like, I don't know these people. But, if they need some help and we're going to do the whole masking thing, like, I'm in. And everybody stepped up. It was so great to see. And I don't think that that's an anomaly, but I think that's something that, we need to continue to do moving forward, is lifting each other up and out and up and helping when and where we can, when people need it.
And Jen, just to add to that point, I think at the beginning when, what was hitting the fan, a lot of the childcare that was in place prior to the pandemic was sort of like poof. If you were relying on a grandparent or a friend or even a child provider, like those options were no longer. Kids out of school.
What are you going to do?
You can't, you were not able to rely on sort of your backups, your go-tos, your community that was helping you, because it does take a village.
Mm-hmm. So before we move on and we dive into the pay equality, because that's the next topic that I want to dive into, can you guys give a recommendation for those that are listening, and specifically women? What can an individual do to maybe ask their employer for a more flexible work schedule, or something that can accommodate them so maybe they don't have to leave the workforce. Because if their organization or their employer would allow them to log in at 10 as opposed to 9, or log off at 5 and then log back in at 9 p.m. Like, there's flexible things that an organization can do before someone really just decides to like quit the workforce altogether.
And honestly, organizations should be doing that. They should have been doing it before, and they should definitely be doing it now. And I think for the most important thing is you have to ask. If you don't ask, you don't get. And I think that certainly in my company, what we did is, there's people all over the board, people just out of college, people who have kids that are, out of the house, people who have babies. And, we sat down as a group, as leaders, and said, okay, we need to be flexible. So, people who are working in teams, it's like, okay, they've got maybe a 1-year-old, and the 1-year-old sleeps from, let's just say noon to 2. And so that's like when we said, okay, these important meetings, we're going to try to accommodate this person's schedule. And, I think historically people would be like, you know what, don't bring your private life to work. Guess what? Our private life is in our work now every single day. I mean, right outside my door is my son going like, he knows I'm doing this. So, but like, that's life. And I think, we have to accommodate that. That's the way it is. And corporations should be doing that, because I think people are going to be more productive. They're going to feel less stress if there's more flexibility. And does it matter if we start at 8 and we end at 5, if the actual work gets done? I mean, really? I mean, and sometimes it might, but I think we've shown for a year when, we've all been through sort of a meat grinder, that we can do it. So we should be doing it. I mean, it shouldn't be a new thing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think the people that were going to ask for it felt confident enough to say, I feel good, I put in the work, I deserve this, and I can ask for it. And they would have that confidence. How the employer side would take that was, sort of on a case-by-case basis. Right. But you're right that, first of all, conversations like these need to be had so that employers can recognize that, hey, we've made it this far. The pandemic has shown that we can be flexible. And senior people at organizations need to be championing those that are good and do a great job and put in the work internally, as well as like hiring externally for those that are, qualified.
100%.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that everyone that's listening finds these comments and this discussion refreshing, and maybe they'll feel empowered to ask their organization for what they need if they do need something. So we're going to dive now into the pay gap that we're still seeing today, which is crazy to me, but it is something that does still exist. So women are paid 82 cents per every dollar that a man makes. So this is something that we need to talk about, right? How can women and minorities fight for pay equality and bring their value so that their employer really understands the value that they're bringing to the table on a daily basis? And this is for both of you.
I mean, I'll just kick it off. I think Jen said it earlier, like, you certainly have to ask for it, right? You're not going to get it if you don't ask for it. Full stop.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I also think that it's, in corporations, I think there has to be more transparency. Right. And, I'm not saying everyone has to open up their financial, documents, but there certainly are, places where you can go, where you can see, what you should be paid for doing this job in this area and this community and this state as a baseline. And, people should be looking at that and using that as a tool. And I think it is, it's not going to change overnight. But I think, being more transparent about it, I think, if you have the courage to have a conversation with your coworkers, I know that there are some people who frown upon that. when I was at the company before I started Entry, I had that conversation, and I found out that my peers, my male peers, were making, probably 20% more than I was. And I had 2 C-suite titles, and I was like, time out. This is a hard no. And I think that they were surprised that there was a gap, and nobody had a conversation about it. And I don't think it was an intentional thing. I think it was like, well, this is the way that we've always done it. And because I brought it up, and I was like, okay, we are going to have a conversation about this. But I also had the power to do that because of my role in the company. And so I think that women in particular who are leaders in their organizations and have a responsibility to ask those questions. We all have a responsibility.
I would just add also that, I once had this boss that said, never ask for a raise because you want one. Never ask for a raise because you think you need more to buy whatever. Like, you have to know your worth. So, you sort of have to be confident to ask for a raise or for more whatever, because you're doing a great job. So I don't know, this is probably 25, 30 years ago already, but it always stuck with me that, like, okay, well, I have to know my worth. Meaning, like, to say, okay, well, I could go find another job or another person that's doing the exact same job as me that happens to be male or whatever, sort of like backing up your request.
Yeah. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. And I like what you both said. And I always say this, I even say this to our resellers and on all my trainings. Like, if you don't ask, the worst thing someone can say is no. And if they say no, then you move on or you figure out another path for yourself. But it's just a no. It's not the end of the world. And I think that's a really big takeaway from both of the comments that you have both made. So we've gone over the challenges faced. So now let's talk about how we can control the situation to survive and thrive, as Jen puts it. I love that little line, and I've used it and stole it, but it's okay. So
somebody else. So if whoever is listening to this and I stole it from you, I'm sorry. I will pay you homage. But we got to trademark it, right? We can decide it's going to be a great day, or we can decide it's going to be a bad day. And I think that we all have bad days. I won't get into my personal life, but the last 7 weeks have been probably some of the hardest of my entire adult life. And I'm choosing, even though sometimes I don't feel like it, to think of 3 things I'm grateful for, and to show myself a little bit of grace when I stumble and when I fall down. So I hope everybody else can do that same thing, but that's where sort of this survive and thrive comes from.
Yeah, I love that. No one's perfect, and we're always growing and figuring out better ways to be a better person, a better friend, a better coworker, and so on. So with the next slide, this one is for Alana, and then the next one will be for Jen. So we're going to talk through 5 tips for personal growth. So Alana, if you could talk us through numbers 1 through 5, really, how can someone develop themselves?
Sure. So we talked a lot about advocacy already, and personal advocacy. Obviously, you need to stand up for yourself and fight for what you want. That is hard and fast rule. And I think that actually bleeds into the authenticity, is that you should be proud of the work that you do and who you are as an individual more often than not. Your unique perspective brings more to the table than you might get credit for. I think that a lot of employers historically were looking for, clones of themselves and say, oh, they really get me. We're going to have this great culture fit. When really that unique perspective is important to bring to the table. Like, you want someone that will complement you in the gaps as an employer, to fill the gaps that you might have within the organization. Vulnerability is a big one. I mean, I don't think that nothing says vulnerability like working from home in the middle of a pandemic. With everything happening in your background, and the animals and the babies and the spouses and whoever else is working in your house or walking around.
Or the UPS driver.
I think exactly. And listen, I mean, I think that needs to be okay, particularly now. I think it is okay, and I think it shows humanity in a way that we didn't really have access to before. I think actually those that allowed themselves to be vulnerable at work had an easier time connecting with coworkers and other people at their office, because we're all human. In terms of resilience, I mean, I think that everyone loves a good comeback story, and I think we're here, right? Like, I think that at times it can feel like there's nowhere to go but up. But I think that also goes back to being your own advocate. You really need to be resilient. I can't tell you how many times I have failed and failed again. And that should be also kind of okay. Like, that's the way you grow and that's the way you learn.
Even when it hurts.
You got to take risks, right? No risk, no reward. And being resilient is definitely a part of that. And then being able to pivot, I guess a lot of your success, and I don't want to take the work that one puts in away from what, like, obviously it's a lot of hard work and a lot of effort, but a lot of it is also about timing. That your success is very much related to timing in many cases. But really, full industries have been able to pivot during this time, and if they can do it, so can you. And then just one last piece, and I'm not really sure where this fits in, but Jen mentioned it earlier, is about community. Like, you got to find your people as you grow in your career. It becomes a little bit lonelier, particularly I think for women. Like, I more often than not, a senior woman executive is the only one in the room. So you got to find your community elsewhere. And those are the people that lift you up. Those are your friends, your family, like whoever you need to go to when you're having a crisis of confidence and say, remind me why I deserve this. Remind me why, I can ask for that promotion. I think those people are very important.
You said something that just struck such a chord with me that, I struggled with over the course of my career. And it's like the imposter syndrome. Do I really deserve to be here? Did I earn this? Like, when you start second guessing yourself, or maybe somebody, kind of comes at you at work or in a meeting and kind of tries to take you down a couple notches. And in that community, those peers are so critical when you have those moments, because we all have them, and it's normal to have them. So that was very helpful, Alana.
There's so many takeaways from what Alana said, and Jen, what you also echoed from Alana's statement. So a lot to take in. So if we can move on to the steps to achieve career advancement, obviously personal growth and career, they do go hand in hand. So Jen, from your perspective with Intri, how can one take these steps to really advance their career as well?
So, I mean, like with Intri, or even without Intri, right? I mean, like I first of all, thank you for saying it. I really appreciate that. But I think for career advancement, whether you use Intri or another sort of services, setting your intention, where do you want to go? And in COVID right now, actually, I think there are some really cool opportunities where, if let's just say I live in Austin, right? I may now, if I wanted to, I could go work for a company in New York. I could go work for a company in Seattle. I could go work for a company in Chicago, because we've proven that, again, that we can work remotely and that we can be productive and things happen. So I think that's a whole new opportunity that hasn't been there before. I think that sort of box that everybody was kept in has sort of burst open. And I think that's awesome. But setting an intention of where it is you want to go. If you want to grow you're in marketing and you're a marketing manager and you want to be a marketing director, you want to be a VP of marketing, set your roadmap, set your intentions, and don't think, my dad used to say this long ago, and he would say, don't dress for the job that you have, dress for the job that you want. And I realize that times have probably changed a little bit, but I think that mentality is really important. So you may just be graduating college. Where do you want to go? What company do you want to work for? Where do you want to land? I think that is a really critical part. I think identifying your strengths and being honest with yourself about your weaknesses is equally important to identifying your strength. I think standing up, speaking out, finding mentors, reaching out to people. I've had tons of people who have reached out to me on LinkedIn. They're like, hey, I'm in this hard spot, or can I get some advice? I generally always make time for those people, because I've had people in my past. I didn't get to where I am because I'm so brilliant and lucky. I got there, A, because I worked really hard, and B, because I had people who helped me along the way, who let me stand on their shoulders, who lifted me up, who said, you may not be exactly qualified for this, but I see your ambition, I see your intention, I see your vision, so I'm going to give you this shot. And I think those are all really important things to set yourself up for success. And when you do fail, as we all do, to own it, to feel it, and then say, what is it that I learned from this, so I don't make the same mistake again. And I think, what is the key advice for people trying to advance your career in your personal or professional life? I think it's that, I don't want to say this and sound cheesy, but you really can do anything that you want. I truly believe that. 7 years ago, I didn't know anything about AI. I didn't know anything about development. And I built and sold 3 software companies since then. So if I can do that, anybody can do that. And I think believe in yourself, no matter what. Even if you're having the worst, most terrible day in the history of the universe, there are probably 3 things that you can still be grateful for, right? And, for me, in my darkest moments, I wake up and I think, you know what? I'm so grateful I woke up. I am so grateful that I have these minutes to be kind to myself, to sort of center myself, and that today is a new day, and I'm going to choose to look at it with a glass half full. And I guess that would be my advice, cheesy as it sounds.
It's not cheesy. I love that. And for everyone on the call, I'm just going to tell you this. So every morning I listen to daily affirmations, and it really helps get me into a more grateful mental state, if you will. But it goes along with exactly what you said, Jen. So thank you so much for all of that. And thank you to both of you. This was such a great conversation. And I think we probably could have talked about these topics for like 5 hours. There's so much unpacking to do for everything that we discussed. But the biggest takeaways, I would say, would be to be your own advocate, ask for what you need, have support around you of people that believe in you and inspire you, and be vulnerable. Like, no one's perfect, and just be real with yourself and others. So to close it out, I think that we do have some questions that are trickling in. Alana,
I do want to just say one quick thing, and
sure.
I think it's kind of important, is that, don't expect anybody to save you, right? You need to save yourself. You need to be the person that believes in you more than anybody. And even sometimes if you don't believe in yourself, lie. be like, I
Really
can do this, because words have so much power. And you kind of glitched out just for a second when you were talking about the daily affirmations, but that's so important to like, you know, you need to love yourself more than anybody else does. And trust me, you can save yourself. Everyone has the power to do that. That's all I have to say. Okay, sorry.
Oh, that's great. That is good advice. I feel like my dad used to say something similar to me. But Alana, I do want to ask you about your professional development and your journey. For those that are listening, if you could talk a little bit about your path here.
Sure. I didn't zigzag quite as much as Jen. I will say that I was a painfully shy young adult and child. So there was a lot, there's a lot when you talk about like personal advocacy and believing in yourself, there's a lot to overcome for like somewhat of a natural introvert, which is kind of ironic that I got into sales, because you sort of have to put yourself out there. There is a lot about a salesperson that I think everyone should be in sales at some point in their career, because you learn so much about yourself, and you take so much rejection that you sort of overcome so much. But I did get my start in sales, and I realized that even though I lean toward the introvert, there's so much that I can bring to the table in that regard. Like I think I'm a great listener, and I take on other people's problems as my own, and like all of the other sort of periphery requirements of someone that deals with customers on a day-to-day basis is really something that I took on. And then it wasn't, like I said earlier, like I sort of started accelerating just ironically around the same time as my kids were young. And maybe it's because of them that I kept trying harder and harder, and I kept putting myself out there, and I was traveling, and, I was thinking about it the other day, like I was probably like in that parenting, like hardcore parenting mode probably for 4 years, at sort of a key point in my career. And then I just kept going. I tried to get other experiences outside of sales to make me more like operationally well-rounded, more like general management style, which I think sort of brought me to Bridge and to where I am today. And I am eternally grateful.
That's amazing. I love that. Well, good for you for overcoming all of those things. And to close it out, really the last question to both of you, if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self in your career, what would it be?
How much time you got?
I don't know that there's a single piece, but I would say that be fearless. Be bold, be fearless. And, when, someone, kicks you down, or you find yourself in a very awkward situation, just like, if you can address it, if you have the skills and the power to address it. If you make a mistake, own it. And there's always a new day. There's always a new day. There's always a new job. There's always a new opportunity. And that, there are so many things flashing in front of my brain right now of things that have happened. And I just think, be kind to yourself. And, it's, again, I just say, be fearless.
I would say, just to add to that, to rely on yourself, that you are the one that, Jen kind of said this earlier, you're the one that holds the power, right? So, in my last job, I felt passionate about a specific idea, and I can't tell you how many times I pitched the same idea over and over to anyone who would listen. And, some people said, oh, that's a great idea, but didn't really do anything with it. So I sort of went to the next person, and I pitched my idea with the same passion again and again, until finally it sort of resonated and stuck. And they were like, yeah, I'm gonna take a chance on you. And they gave me that shot. But when I started pitching the idea, I was working with a partner, and they were like, yeah, I guess they didn't go for it. Which is why I come back to rely on yourself. If you feel passionate about it and you know it's a good idea, I would say stick with it.
So many takeaways from today's conversation. I loved having this discussion with both of you. So thank you again for your time. And for everyone else listening, you will be getting an email with the presentation, the video recording, and other materials about developing your professional identity. So thank you so much for joining us. Hope everyone has a great day. Talk soon.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Jen.
Bye.
Thanks.